It was on a jail cell like this one, where detainees arrested by the military without charge during the martial law era spent days on end, often without a connection to the outside world and their families. This jail cell is a replica designed by Hilda Narciso, a detainee during the military rule under Marcos. Most of what was incorporated in the design comes from her memory. Hilda was raped by members of the military then, a crime that remains unpunished to this day. To her, the issue of impunity has always been a personal one.
The only way how to...
48-year-old Emily Soriano lost her 16-year-old son Angelito in December to this war. Gunmen, identified by witnesses as local police, shot a bullet through his upper body. She tells me of the brutality with which Angelito was murdered and the pain over a life cut short too soon.
Antonio Invento's son, Corporal Jaime Invento, was killed in the front line of battle in Marawi in southern Philippines as he fought against Islamic State loyalists. A tearful welcome, but certainly not the kind that Joanna de Mafelis would have hoped for when she left the country to work in Kuwait.
Residents of Village 160 here in Caloocan City, where the De Los Santoses live, will tell you that this place is beset by all too common vices, which they say help them cope with abject poverty. But they say Kian was different. A nice boy caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. It was on this dark alley where Kian de los Santos, by witnesses' accounts, was allegedly dragged by local cops and shot to his death. The police report says cops shot him in self-defense, but photos of his dead body shows him kneeling down on this corner right here. State figures show that an average of 51 drug suspects end up dead for every government operative killed in these drug busts.
49-year-old Josie Gacho is used to living hand-to-mouth. Filipinos like her have relied on state-subsidized rice sold by the National Food Authority, or NFA. It's cheaper than other types of rice sold in local markets. Instead of being on the other side of the camera, these journalists have become the news, protesting what they say is a declining space for media freedom in the Philippines.
The Lady of Fatima, brought to Sunday's gathering, is the same one held by key government defectors during the 1986 revolt that ousted Ferdinand Marcos. The Blessed Virgin Mary is an enduring symbol of faith in the Catholic majority Philippines, and this congregation clearly hopes that it will once again become a rallying point for Filipinos during what church leaders see as troubled times.
Filipino kids in this village inside Manila's Chinatown know the movements to a dance rooted in Chinese culture. The lion dance is one way they earn extra money. They practice in the evening after school in this dimly lit street corner.
It was on the ruins of this Manila Cathedral to my left, a structure destroyed during the Second World War but rebuilt after, where a Jewish refugee, Herbert Zipper, conducted the Manila Symphony Orchestra in a celebratory concert after the Philippines' liberation from Japanese forces.
The Talmud says whoever saves a life, it is as though he saved an entire world. By
Buena Bernal reports.
Sun, sand, sea. It's this island life that drew Kiko Rustia, a former television host, to move to Boracay 2 years ago. With his wife and 2 children, Kiko found a welcoming community in this island. He's saddened that it's now subject to a controversial months-long rehabilitation.
We feel Brianna Bernal finds out how they're bracing for the closure.
For 30 years, Thelmo Andrade has ferried some 200 passengers a day to and from Boracay.
Tuwang-tuwa kami.
U.S. Lieutenant General Lawrence Nicholson says they are not disappointed with the scaling down of the military drills this year. He tagged this year's exercises as a quote-unquote inflection in the 66-year military partnership between the Philippines and the United States. He says this is a long-term partnership and changes are expected from one year to another. He says the shift of focus from maritime security last year to humanitarian and counterterrorism drills this year are still Lopez is using social media to win the hearts and minds of people on this issue. She's been posting live videos of her reflections on her policy. She's been posting aerial shots of mining excavations showing flattened mountains and muddy lake waters. But ultimately, the decision now lies on the Commission on Appointments on whether she will keep her job to be able to institute what she says are much-needed reforms in the mining industry here in the Philippines. Christine.
The ASEAN Regional Economic Outlook 2018 sees a resilient GDP growth of 5.4% in the region, which includes ASEAN member states, China, Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea. But it also notes risks, which it says are mainly external. There are perennial risks such as climate change and cyber attacks. There are also near-term, medium-impact risks such as a possible escalation of global tensions from the imposition of tariffs by the United States. While the risk has not materialized yet, the report says several countries such as China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Malaysia are contributors to the U.S. merchandise trade deficit and are therefore vulnerable to these protectionist measures.
It's a risk that we watch very.
It was on this Golden Mosque behind me here in downtown Manila where the remains of Kayamora Maute, father of the Maute brothers, were prayed over last night before being buried in a cemetery north of Manila. His two sons. In a session today, the Philippine Supreme Court, in a 10-5 vote, declared as constitutional the one-year extension of martial law across the Mindanao Island. Mindanao's Marawi.
Amid Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's ongoing drug war, which has claimed thousands of lives of suspected small-time criminals, one of his sons, Davao City Vice Mayor Paulo Duterte, was accused of being a member of a transnational crime organization.
Explains that with the stigma attached right now to being a suspected drug user here in the Philippines and given the government's record of killings, she says the plan puts the vulnerable children's lives at risk. Drew the Philippines from the International Criminal Court's Rome Statute a month ago and promised to continue his crackdown on drugs, which has killed thousands of people. He had also reportedly threatened to arrest Fatou Bensouda, an International Criminal Court prosecutor, if she engages or conducts activities in the Philippines, arguing that since the Philippines...
Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno in a speech urged respect for the Constitution, which ensures due process rights even for suspects. She said the Constitution is a sacred covenant between citizens and the government, and anyone who violates it and takes shortcuts must face the full force of the law.
The government says democracy is alive and well in the Philippines, but press freedom advocates maintain that the strength of a democracy is measured by how well it treats criticism and dissent.
Purple and red ribbons representing opposite camps surround the Supreme Court compound in Baguio City. Celebration breaks out as the High Court declares the reproductive health law constitutional.
The Supreme Court rules most provisions of the beleaguered Cybercrime Prevention Act are constitutional. Seen by critics as the muzzling of online expression, water samples from Manila Bay in 2007 show human waste bacteria and heavy metal particles go beyond the environmental standard. Maricel is among 2 million Filipino fishermen whose incomes plummeted due to the deteriorating state of the Philippine seas. More and more Asian hospitals are going green. Advocate Gary Cohen says the health sector should be at the forefront of climate change mitigation. It's the new medical buzzword in the Philippines. Stem cell therapy is a procedure which uses repair cells found in the body to replace old cells.
The court junked his plea to stop the plunder and graft cases against him over his own misuse of millions in public funds. Outside the campus, men and women, old and young, inch their way to the gates of UST, where Pope Francis is set to meet with religious leaders and address an...
The parents of Mary Jane Veloso live in this farming village in Nueva Ecija. Mary Jane is an overseas Filipino worker and a mother of 2.
It was a quick voluntary surrender for U.S. visiting soldier Joseph Scott Pemberton, suspect in the murder of transgender Filipina Jennifer Laude. The Laude camp describes Pemberton in a gray suit and in handcuffs, escorted by U.S. Marines in white polo long sleeves. This is his first.
The debate is sure to continue on the nuances of the law, even as anti-RH advocates refuse to concede defeat. But as the core provisions of the law are upheld, its impending implementation already spells victory for the RH activists. And as the bloc moves towards a freer flow of goods, services, and skilled labor, Sereno says ASEAN judiciaries must ensure that the rule of law prevails. Buena Bernal, Rappler, Boracay.